What's going on, guys? This is VinylicPuma, back with another Fallout video, and today I wanted to talk about what I think is easily one of the most misunderstood aspects of Fallout 4, and that is weapon bashing along with the basher perk. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with gun bashing, as the same button that you hold to throw a grenade can be tapped in order to perform a weapon bash. On the one hand, bashing is pretty useful as it does allow you to potentially stagger opponents provided you get up close. However, on the flip side, and at first glance, gun bashing is usually a terrible way of dealing damage, and more often than not, using a conventional melee weapon is a better choice. Not to mention that melee and unarmed weapons tend to be able to scale damage better, as you can benefit from a wide variety of melee-related perks, magazines, and consumables, while gun bashing is a lot more limited. However, and despite these issues, you might be surprised to know that gun bashing can actually be pretty overpowered once you understand how it works. And to start, we should talk about the basher perk itself and why it's actually a pretty great perk. Much like some of the other weapon-based perks like Rifleman or Heavy Gunner, Basher will double your bash damage with maximum perk investment, and like some of the melee weapon-focused perks like Iron Fist or Big Leagues, you could potentially cripple opponents as well. The best part about Basher, though, is that with perk rank 4, Basher will allow your gun bashes to perform passive criticals, which is much like how you used to be able to perform criticals in Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 3. None of the other weapon-based perks allow you to do this, and if you ask me, not having to rely on VATS to perform a critical is a major advantage, and gives you a chance to bash and deal double or more damage every time you attack. There's also the additional benefit that, like most conventional critical hits that you would achieve through VATS, gun bash criticals can have their damage improved thanks to perks like Better Criticals, which can allow you to deal 2.5 times extra damage on a crit. You can also find a weapon with the Lucky Legendary Weapon effect, and provided you perform a gun bash critical with it, you should see your crit damage be double what it would normally be. Of course, I guess the downside is that your chance to perform a gun bash critical with Basher is low, being only 15% according to the Fallout Wiki. However, it is worth mentioning that you can increase this to 40%, provided you have the Overdrive Chem, which should allow you to perform gun bash criticals far more often. Ultimately, and with all of these things in mind, the Basher perk itself is actually quite good. After all, it allows you to perform criticals, which can be boosted to crazy amounts with perks like Better Criticals, and you can improve the critical hit chance of your gun bashes with the Chem Overdrive. The only problem is the actual base damage of your gun bashes, which is something we can definitely remedy. Now, there are a number of different factors that boost the damage of your gun bashes in Fallout 4. However, before we talk about how to boost your bash damage, it's probably a good idea that we talk about the specific types of weapons that you should be looking for. Obviously, you're going to want a bayonet on the weapon in question, as this will improve bash damage. However, you may also be surprised to know that other customizations like the armor-piercing receiver that you can see on some rifles and pistols will also improve your bash damage. And speaking of rifles and pistols in particular, rifles tend to outperform pistols as the presence of any stock appears to improve bash damage. Additionally, certain legendary effects can improve gun bash damage as well. A penetrating effect on a rifle or pistol will improve the base damage of your bashes, while a lucky effect will improve the damage on your gun bash criticals. So as a general rule, pick a rifle over a pistol, make sure you can attach a bayonet to the weapon in question, equip the armor-piercing mod if it's available, and if you can find something with a legendary weapon effect, try to get either the penetrating or lucky effects. Now, if you're looking for specific guns or you want the best guns for gun bashing, here are two of my picks. When it comes to single bashes, I've found that the handmade rifle tends to be the best one available. What makes the handmade rifle unique compared to the other rifles is that the handmade rifle's own barrel is capable of improving bash damage. Plus, the handmade rifle also supports the large serrated bayonet customization, which is slightly better and yields more damage than the standard large bayonet customization that you're going to find on most other rifles. So I would say if you want to deal the most damage per strike, then the handmade rifle is the best choice. The only problem with the handmade rifle is you need the Big Leagues perk in order to craft upgrades, which is confusing since this perk doesn't boost bash damage. So that's something to be aware of, and maybe if you're heavily invested in melee already, the handmade rifle may be a great option for you. When it comes to multiple bashes, I've found that the minigun is the best choice. Interestingly, if you get rid of all of your 5mm ammo for the minigun and have the shredder customization equipped, you can dry fire and do multiple bashes in 1 second. Obviously, this is great for DPS and is also useful in conjunction with some of the other properties of the basher perk that I mentioned earlier. After all, the more times you attack, the more chances you can stagger, cripple, or potentially crit enemies. Overall though, both the handmade rifle and the shredder minigun are excellent, and if you're looking for the best weapons to bash with, I would say it would be either one of these with a lucky legendary effect. Now, once you've got a good bashing weapon and you've maxed out the basher perk, it's time to improve damage even further. Whatever you do, try to avoid percentage-based melee damage perks and/or consumables, as these never boost bash damage. So specifically, things like Big Leagues, Rooted, or Ninja never work, and chems like the Fury Chem also don't work. What does boost bash damage beyond the basher perk are additional boosts to the strength special stat. Fortunately, it's possible to achieve about 17 strength before any legendary armor pieces or power armor by taking the following steps. First, use Day Tripper at 10 strength in conjunction with the Special Book and Sanctuary to reach 11 strength. Second, acquire the Strength Bobblehead from the Mass Fusion building to reach 12th strength. Third, you can acquire the 5th issue of the Scav perk magazine from Dry Rock Gulch and Nuke World. Then make sure you have less than 100 caps on your person to reach 15 strength. And fourth and finally, you can spec for 10 endurance and acquire the first rank of solar powered to reach 17 strength during the daytime. Now from this point, it depends on how practical you want to be and whether you want power armor or not, or whether you want to be a glass cannon or not. If you do want power armor, which I would say is probably the most practical and reasonable option, be sure to use the military paint in conjunction with the motion-assisted servos upgrade to achieve an additional 3 strength to achieve a total strength of 20. If you don't want power armor, I'd recommend you try to acquire the Dirty Army fatigues with or without ballistic weave for 1 strength, as well as 6 armor pieces, including the helmet, that all have the fortified legendary armor effect, which should boost your strength by 1 for each piece. This should take you to a total of 25 strength, which should give you some pretty good bash damage potential, while also maintaining some level of survivability. Now, if you don't care about survivability and you want to be a total glass cannon, be sure to swap all of the fortified armor with rad-powered armor, reach a really high rad count, and if you do it right, you should be able to receive 7 strength per armor piece. 6 times 7 is 42, plus 1 strength from the Dirty Army fatigues, added on top of your 17th strength base, and you should be able to achieve a grand total of 60 strength, which should yield some crazy bash damage. At this point, whether you decide to go with power armor, go without, or go full glass cannon, you can also take a number of other consumables to boost strength further. Specifically, consumables like Bufftats, Psychobuff, XL, Dirty Wastelander, and Grilled Hermit Crab can all be taken at the same time to boost strength by an additional 13 points. If you go the glass cannon or rad-powered routes, you can also take the Strong Sludge cocktail, which will boost your strength depending on the number of rads you have. And if you're getting about 7 strength per piece with rad powered, you should be getting about 5 additional points from the Strong Sludge cocktail, which will achieve a total of 18 strength when combined with the Bufftats, Psychobuff, and all of the other chems. When this 18 strength from chems gets combined with the 60 strength that you have from rad powered and all of the stuff that I mentioned before, you can achieve as high as 78 strength, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, if you don't decide to do any of the suggestions I've made to boost strength, or even if you only just do some of it, the most important consumable that you will need to acquire to boost your bash damage is the GUAI roast. It sounds stupid, but for whatever reason, this consumable increases gun bash damage so dramatically that it quite frankly makes bashing overpowered. In fact, you could forgo just about every other consumable, armor piece, and perk that boosts strength, and simply just consume a GUAI roast to greatly improve the base damage of your bashes. My guess as to why this works has to do with the numerical bonus that the GUAI roast provides to melee damage. But regardless, it does work, and if you want to improve your bash damage dramatically, you will need this consumable. Ultimately, once you have anywhere from 20 to 78 strength, and you've taken the GUAI roast to maximize the base damage of your gun bashes, just remember to make sure you've got the basher and better criticals perks, along with a decent amount of overdrive, and you really should be set. And with that in mind, let's talk about some results. With about 20 strength, a Lucky Shredder minigun should allow you to cheese pretty much anything you come across in the game, as the sheer amounts of staggering and criticals that you can inflict will usually make most enemies melt. Even some of the game's toughest enemies, like the enraged fog crawler, can be felled fairly easily on normal mode, provided you make sure to take the GUAI roast beforehand. With an absurd 78 strength, the GUAI roast, overdrive, and the lucky handmade rifle, I've found I've been able to easily one-shot pretty much anything with under 1,000 health in normal. And provided you actually pull off a critical hit in normal, you can one-shot the enraged fog crawler from Far Harbor. As far as higher difficulties are concerned though, like very hard, I found this goes down to 2 shots, but even still, it's very impressive. So ultimately, even though it's not the most powerful thing ever, the damage scaling potential that you can get from bash damage is pretty amazing and can be truly monstrous against the vast majority of the threats that the game would ever throw at you. Like I mentioned earlier on in this video, the major advantage that gun bashing has when compared to other damage methods, whether it being automatics via commando, heavy weapons via heavy gunner, or even melee weapons via big leagues, is that the basher perk allows gun bashes to randomly perform criticals, which can greatly increase your damage potential. Also, like conventional melee or unarmed weapons, the ability for gun bashes to scale with strength gives you a huge opportunity to greatly increase your gun bash's base damage. However, I would say that when comparing gun bashes to melee or unarmed weapons, the latter ultimately wins out, and that's simply just because you have more scaling options available. Whether it be from perks like Ninja or Rooted, or chems like Fury, you are just going to have more scaling options available to boost the damage of those weapon types. Even still though, gun bashing is pretty OP, and considering the rate at which you can attack with the Shredder minigun, if you have a lucky legendary effect on that thing, you're probably going to be able to steamroll the vast majority of the threats that you'll ever encounter. So I guess at the end of the day, and to answer the question posed in this video's title, gun bashing as well as the basher perk itself can be pretty amazing in Fallout 4. The ability to pull off random criticals from the basher perk, as well as the fact that gun bashing can be greatly improved via heavy investment in strength, allows it to become incredibly powerful. I think the unfortunate thing though is that none of this is really made obvious by the game itself. Not only is a given weapon's bash damage never displayed on the item card, but the only way you can figure out what boosts bash damage and what doesn't is through Fallout 4's in-game console, which is only available to PC users. Which, if you're on console, it would be much more difficult to figure any of this out. Things are made even more confusing when things like the handmade rifle in particular requires the Big Leagues perk to craft the necessary upgrades to get the most out of your gun bashes, yet the Big Leagues perk itself doesn't actually help to improve gun bash damage. I guess the upside is that it's fun to figure out how gun bashing mechanics work, and to actually pull it off successfully in-game is a lot of fun. But I do have to say that I hope Bethesda makes mechanics like this a little more obvious, or at least a little bit easier to figure out in the future. Especially since putting together a half-decent bayonet/gun bash style build could have been a lot more interesting at the game's launch. But if you're wondering if the concept of a gun bash build is possible in Fallout 4, I would definitely say it is, and you really should try it out. Alright guys, I think that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you learned something from this video, or if you just liked this video, feel free to leave a like. Click the bell so you can be notified when I upload more videos. And as always, thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.